A black woman in a $40 sweater extended her hand to the white CEO. "Mr. Thornton, I'm Brenda Hayes. I'd love to discuss—" He refused to take it, stepped back like she carried a disease. "I don't shake hands with the help," his voice echoed across the ballroom. "Security! Who let this black woman in here? This is an investor gala, not a soup kitchen." He turned to his colleagues, laughing. "Look at her clothes. People like her sneak in, pretend they belong, then cry racism when we throw them out." 50 wealthy guests watched. Some laughed, some filmed. No one defended her. He refused to shake her hand tonight. But the next morning, when he walked into his own boardroom, he would find her sitting in his chair. 6 hours before the gala, Brenda Hayes sat in her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Hayes Capitol building in downtown Baltimore. The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across her mahogany desk. From her window, she could see the harbor where her mother used to take her as a child, back when they couldn't afford anything but the free view. The walls of her office told a story that few people ever heard. A framed degree from Howard University hung next to her Wharton MBA. Both earned with honors. Both paid for with scholarships, night shifts, and determination that most people couldn't fathom. A photograph showed her shaking hands with Warren Buffett at a charity gala. Another captured her ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, the first black woman from Baltimore to do so. A Forbes magazine cover from 3 years ago declared her the quiet billionaire. How Brenda Hayes built a $4 billion empire without anyone noticing. That was always the point. Not being noticed, flying under the radar while accumulating power, letting others underestimate her until it was far too late. Her company, Hayes Capital Partners, managed $4.2 billion in assets. She had started it with $50,000 borrowed against her first apartment, a cramped one-bedroom in a neighborhood most investors wouldn't drive through. 30 years later, she controlled more wealth than entire countries. Cassie Mills, her chief operating officer, sat across the desk reviewing acquisition documents on her tablet. Cassie was 38, a Harvard Law graduate, and one of the few people Brenda trusted completely. They had worked together for 12 years, ever since Brenda had hired her straight out of law school when no one else would take a chance on a young black woman from Detroit. "The acquisition closes tomorrow at 9 a.m., Cassie said. "Once the SEC filing goes through, we'll own 55.2% of Thornton Ridley Technologies. Full majority control." Brenda nodded slowly, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Good. The board doesn't know. Bradley Thornton doesn't know. They're all going to wake up tomorrow to a completely different reality." "That's exactly the idea." Cassie leaned forward. "Are you planning to attend the investor gala tonight? I can arrange the presidential suite at the hotel, private security detail, a car service. We could even coordinate with their board chairman to arrange a private introduction." "No." Brenda's voice was soft, but carried absolute finality. "I'll go alone. No security. No announcements. And Cassie, I need you to make sure no one at that event knows who I am. No one." Cassie's brow furrowed with confusion. "But in 12 hours, you'll own more than half their company. Why would you want to hide that?" Brenda stood and walked to the window. The Baltimore skyline stretched before her, glittering with the promise of evening. Somewhere out there, Bradley Thornton was preparing for his gala, confident in his power, certain of his place in the world. "Because I want to see who he really is. Not who he pretends to be when cameras are rolling. Not who he performs as when he knows he's being evaluated." She turned back to Cassie. "I want to see how he treats people when he thinks they don't matter." That evening, Brenda stood before her closet in the penthouse she shared with Jerome. Rows of designer suits hung in perfect order. Dresses worth more than most people's annual salaries. Jewelry that could fund a small foundation. She chose none of it. Instead, she selected a simple cream cashmere sweater from the back of the closet. $40 from a department store. Navy trousers, sensible flats, no designer labels, no visible wealth. Her husband Jerome appeared in the doorway, watching with quiet understanding. At 62, he still carried himself with the authority of a man who had spent 30 years as a federal judge. "Interesting outfit choice," he observed. "It's a test." She fastened her mother's old Timex watch around her wrist. It was worth maybe $200. Her mother had worn it through 40 years of nursing shifts. "Mama always said you can judge a person by how they treat people they think have no power." She met Jerome's eyes in the mirror. "Tonight, I find out exactly who Bradley Thornton really is." Brenda arrived at the Grand Monarch Hotel at 7:30. She had taken an Uber instead of her usual town car. No driver waiting at the curb. No assistant handling logistics. Just a black woman in simple clothes walking into one of the most exclusive events in Baltimore. The registration desk was staffed by a young blonde woman whose professional smile flickered when she saw Brenda approach. The receptionist's eyes performed a quick calculation. Simple sweater, no jewelry, dark skin. Her conclusion was instant. "Name?" The warmth had evaporated from her voice. "Brenda Hayes. Hayes Capital Partners." The receptionist scrolled through her tablet with obvious skepticism. Found the name, but there was no VIP flag, no special instructions, just another entry among hundreds. She handed Brenda a generic name tag without making eye contact, the kind given to minor investors and plus ones, the kind that said, "You don't matter here." Brenda entered the ballroom and felt the atmosphere immediately. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across $100,000 dresses and $10,000 suits. Men with silver hair and gold watches clustered around the bar. Women dripped with diamonds that could pay off mortgages. The air hummed with wealth and privilege and the particular confidence that came from never having been told no. Before approaching Bradley Thornton, Brenda spent 30 minutes watching him work the room. What she witnessed confirmed every suspicion and exceeded every fear. She watched him greet a white investor. All smiles. Firm handshake. He personally poured the man's champagne and laughed heartily at what appeared to be a mediocre joke. She watched a female board member approach to discuss something. Bradley barely glanced at her, kept talking to the men, dismissed her with a wave of his hand when she tried to interject. Then came the moment that sealed her judgment. A black waiter approached to refill champagne glasses. Bradley didn't acknowledge him, didn't say thank you, didn't even glance in his direction. When the waiter moved a fraction too slowly, Bradley's voice turned razor sharp. "Hey, we're not paying you to stand there and daydream. Move it." The waiter lowered his head and hurried away without a word. No one at Bradley's table seemed to notice or care. 5 minutes later, Bradley was laughing with two executives. He made no effort to lower his voice. "Diversity quotas. That's why we can't have nice things in corporate America anymore. HR keeps forcing us to hire people who aren't qualified just because of their..." He made a vague, dismissive gesture. "Background. You know how it is." His companions laughed nervously. One of them glanced around to see if anyone was listening. Brenda had seen enough, but she needed to be certain, needed to give him one final chance. She straightened her simple sweater and walked toward him, her stride calm and professional. This was how any legitimate businesswoman would introduce herself. Polite, professional, respectful. "Mr. Thornton, I'm Brenda Hayes. I've been following your company's AI division with great interest. Very impressive work. I was hoping we might speak for a few minutes about potential opportunities." Bradley turned. His eyes moved with practiced assessment. Face, clothes, skin. The evaluation took less than 3 seconds. She could almost see the labels forming in his mind. Black. Simply dressed. Nobody important. His lip curled with contempt. "I don't shake hands with the help." The words struck like a slap across the face. But Brenda didn't flinch. "Sir, I'm not—" "Security!" The shout echoed across the ballroom like a gunshot. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward the confrontation. Bradley was enjoying the attention now. He played to his audience with theatrical outrage. This is exactly why we need better security at these events. This is how these people operate. He gestured at Brenda with undisguised contempt. They sneak in. They put on their best goodwill outfit. They pretend they belong. And then they cry racism when we throw them out. Several people in the crowd actually laughed. Others pulled out their phones, eager to capture the spectacle. No one, not a single person, stepped forward to intervene. 2 security guards materialized at Brenda's sides. Large men in dark suits with earpieces and expressionless faces. "Ma'am, you need to come with us, now." She didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't give them the satisfaction of a scene. She simply began walking toward the exit with more dignity than anyone else in that room possessed. The lobby offered no sanctuary from the humiliation. As security escorted her through the marble corridor, she encountered Richard Sims, the company's chief financial officer, arriving late. He was adjusting his tie when he noticed the commotion. "What's going on here?" he asked the guards. "Woman tried to crash the investor event. Mr. Thornton wanted her removed immediately." Richard studied Brenda with the same clinical assessment Bradley had performed. Simple clothes, no jewelry, black skin. His conclusion was identical and instant. "Ma'am, this is a private event for serious investors. If you're here with the catering company, the service entrance is around the back of the building, next to the dumpsters." "I'm not with catering." Brenda's voice remained steady despite everything. "My name is on your guest list. Brenda Hayes. Hayes Capital Partners." Richard touched his earpiece, checking with the registration desk. Confirmation came quickly. Yes, the name was listed, some small investment firm nobody recognized. He shrugged with elaborate indifference. "Well, regardless of what any list says, Mr. Thornton has made his decision. This clearly isn't the right environment for someone like you. I'd suggest leaving quietly before this becomes more embarrassing." He walked past her without another word, disappearing into the ballroom where the party continued uninterrupted by basic human decency. The security guards released Brenda's arms once they reached the main entrance. She stood alone on the sidewalk, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses floating through the doors behind her. Inside, her humiliation was already forgotten. Just another inconvenience dealt with. Another person who didn't know their place. But someone had been watching. Someone had recorded everything. Inside the men's restroom, Devin Price was staring at his phone with trembling hands. He was 23 years old, 3 months into a prestigious internship that was supposed to launch his career in finance. His mother had cried actual tears of joy when he got the acceptance letter. She had worked 2 jobs for 18 years to give him opportunities she never had. Now he held a video that could destroy everything he had worked for. 4 minutes and 23 seconds of footage. Bradley Thornton's words captured in perfect, damning clarity. The laughter of the crowd, the security guards grabbing a dignified woman's arms, and that smile she had given him at the end when she looked directly at his camera. The smile that said she knew something no one else in that room could possibly understand. Devin texted his college roommate. "I have video of TRT's CEO being racist as hell. What should I do?" The response came in seconds. "Post it, burn the whole thing down." But Devin hesitated. His finger hovered over the share button. This was his career, his future, everything his mother had sacrificed for 18 years. Then he thought about his mother. How many times had she come home exhausted with stories just like this? How many times had she been dismissed, ignored, humiliated by people who looked at her skin and saw nothing worth respecting? "Tomorrow," he typed back. "I want to see what happens first." He saved the video to his cloud storage, backed it up twice, and waited. Across town, Brenda sat in her hotel suite, still wearing the $40 sweater. Her mother's watch ticked quietly on her wrist. She called Jerome. "How did the test go?" he asked. "He failed," spectacularly, worse than I imagined possible. Tell me everything. He called me the help. Had security drag me out in front of 50 people. Suggested I belonged at a soup kitchen instead of his precious gala. Said, people like me sneak in and pretend to belong. She checked her watch. 10:45 p.m. The acquisition closes in 10 hours and 15 minutes. Tomorrow at 9, I'm going to walk into his boardroom, sit in his chair, and show him exactly who he refused to shake hands with. 9 o'clock Saturday morning arrived with surgical precision. In her hotel suite, Brenda Hayes signed the final acquisition documents. Her signature was steady, unhurried, absolute. She had been planning this moment for 3 years, since she first identified Thornton Ridley Technologies as an undervalued company crippled by toxic leadership. The leadership problem was about to be solved. At exactly 9 a.m., the SEC filing became official. $780 million transferred electronically between accounts. Hayes Capital Partners now owned 55.2% of Thornton Ridley Technologies. Majority control, voting power, the ability to hire and fire at will. Financial news alerts began cascading across terminals worldwide within minutes. Bloomberg, unknown PE firm acquires majority stake in TRT. CNBC, mystery buyer takes control of tech giant overnight. Reuters, Hayes Capital Partners emerges as surprise TRT acquirer. At 9:15, Bradley Thornton strolled into TRT headquarters with a coffee in hand, still basking in the afterglow of last night's successful gala. His assistant intercepted him before he reached his corner office, her face pale with anxiety. "Sir, the board is requesting an emergency meeting. Right now. Immediately." "About what?" "There's been an acquisition. A majority acquisition. Someone bought controlling interest overnight." Bradley actually laughed. The idea was absurd. "That's completely impossible. Our stock isn't structured for hostile takeovers. And who would have that kind of capital without me knowing about it?" "Sir, they're waiting in the boardroom. Everyone is there." Still chuckling at the apparent misunderstanding, Bradley made his way down the executive corridor. This was obviously some filing error. Perhaps a hostile bid attempt that his lawyers would crush within the hour. He pushed open the boardroom doors with his usual confidence. Every seat was occupied. Walter Hoffman, the chairman, stood by the window looking like he hadn't slept in days. Richard Sims stared at the conference table as if searching for answers in the wood grain. The other board members sat in shell-shocked silence. And at the head of the table, in Bradley's chair, someone was sitting with their back turned. "What the hell is this?" Bradley demanded. "Who is sitting in my—" The chair slowly rotated. Brenda Hayes looked up at him with perfect calm. Same cream sweater, same simple watch, same serene expression. The same black woman he had thrown out of his gala 12 hours ago. "Good morning, Mr. Thornton." Her voice was pleasant, almost warm. "We met last night, though I didn't get the chance to properly introduce myself. You were too busy calling security." Bradley's face cycled through colors, white with shock, red with rage. Then a sickly gray as reality began to penetrate. "My name is Brenda Hayes. I'm the founder and CEO of Hayes Capital Partners." She placed a thick folder of documents on the table. "And as of 9 o'clock this morning, my firm owns 55.2% of your company." The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. "You can verify with your legal team if you'd like. Take your time. I've been patient for 3 years. A few more minutes won't matter." Bradley's mouth opened and closed several times before words emerged. "This is... You planned. You dressed like that to see how you treat people you think don't matter?" "Yes." She stood slowly. "You showed me exactly who you are, Mr. Thornton. Now I'm showing you who I am." She gestured at his chair. "And I believe you're standing in my seat." Devin Price posted the video at 9:30 that morning. His finger had hovered over the button for 15 agonizing minutes while he wrestled with doubt and fear and the memory of his mother's tired eyes. Then he saw the news alerts about the acquisition. Hayes Capital Partners, Brenda Hayes. The woman in his video was the woman who now owned the company. He pressed post. His caption was simple and devastating. TRT CEO refuses to shake black woman's hand, calls security on her. Plot twist. She just bought 55% of his company. The internet exploded. Within 1 hour, the video reached 500,000 views. Within 3 hours, it crossed 10 million. By noon, it was trending in every major country on Earth. The algorithm had found something irresistible, racism caught on camera, followed by instant, perfect karma. Social media transformed into a tsunami of reaction. Twitter erupted with millions of comments. TikTok flooded with duet videos and reaction clips. Instagram stories spread the footage to every corner of the digital world. The comments were merciless. The way she smiled when they walked her out. She knew. She absolutely knew what was coming. He literally said, "I don't shake hands with the help," to his new boss. "I am deceased." This is the most satisfying karma I have witnessed in my entire life. I've watched it 40 times. That woman is my hero forever. She let him hang himself with his own rope. Brenda Hayes said, "I'll destroy you tomorrow," without speaking a single word. Hashtags began trending worldwide. Number 1, TR Truth. Number 2, Brenda Hayes. Number 3, Karma is real. Number 4, Shake on that. TRT's stock price began its descent immediately. 8% down by noon, 12% by 3 o'clock, 16% by market close. Institutional investors were calling in panic. Financial analysts were issuing emergency revised ratings. The company was hemorrhaging value in real time, millions evaporating with every passing hour. In his corner office, Bradley Thornton sat with the blinds sealed shut against the world. His fourth whiskey trembled untouched on his desk. His phone had buzzed over 500 times in 4 hours. He had stopped looking at it after the first 100. Richard Sims entered without bothering to knock. "We need to issue a statement. Immediately. The board is demanding action. Investors are threatening to sue." "She set me up." Bradley's voice was hollow, disconnected from reality. "She deliberately dressed like that. She knew exactly what she was doing. This is entrapment." "Entrapment into what? Being yourself?" Richard's patience had completely evaporated. "She stood there politely and gave you every opportunity to act like a decent human being. You chose to humiliate her instead. On camera, in front of 50 witnesses. That's entirely on you." The TRT communications team released a carefully crafted statement at noon. "Mr. Thornton extends his sincere apologies for any misunderstanding at last evening's investor event. Thornton Ridley Technologies remains deeply committed to diversity, inclusion, and welcoming all shareholders to our corporate family. We look forward to a productive relationship with Hayes Capital Partners." Social media tore it apart within minutes. Misunderstanding? He literally called her the help. What's to misunderstand? This apology is somehow even more offensive than the original video. Welcoming all shareholders. She owns you now. You don't get to welcome her to anything. Their PR team must be crying in the bathroom right now. Meanwhile, Brenda sat in her hotel suite, watching the chaos unfold with detached satisfaction. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests from every major network on the planet, statement demands from financial journalists, commentary requests from social media influencers with millions of followers. She declined every single one. Cassie called at noon, breathless with excitement. "CNN wants an exclusive. Good Morning America offered to fly you to New York tonight. The Today Show, Ellen, Oprah's People. Everyone wants you." "No." "But this is incredible exposure. You could..." The story is telling itself perfectly, Cassie. The video speaks louder than any interview I could give. My silence is more powerful than any statement. She paused. What I need from you is something else entirely. Tonight's board meeting. I want everything we can find on Bradley Thornton. Every HR complaint, every settlement payment, every document they've ever buried. All of it. By evening, 45 million people had watched the video. TRT's stock had dropped 19%. 3 major pension funds announced they were immediately reviewing their positions. And buried in Brenda's inbox was an email from an anonymous TRT employee that would change everything. Ms. Hayes, attached are 10 years of HR complaints against Bradley Thornton. 19 cases. $4.2 million in settlements. All buried under NDAs. All hidden from shareholders. You're just the first victim with the power to fight back. Brenda opened the attachments and began reading. Her expression shifted from satisfaction to cold, determined fury. The documents spread across Brenda's hotel suite like a map of systematic cruelty spanning 15 years. She and Cassie had been reviewing them for 4 hours. What they discovered was worse than either had imagined possible. This wasn't about one incident, one bad night, one caught-on-camera moment of racism. This was about 15 years of documented misconduct, 19 victims, millions of dollars paid to purchase silence. A pattern so clear and consistent it could have been drawn with a ruler. The first file contained HR complaints dating back to 2014. 19 formal complaints filed against Bradley Thornton specifically. 15 came from employees of color. 4 came from women reporting sexual harassment or gender discrimination. Every single complaint had the same resolution stamped across the top. Handled internally, which meant buried, forgotten, paid off, erased. Brenda read the first complaint aloud, her voice steady despite the content that made her stomach turn. Mr. Thornton told me directly that I was a diversity hire and should be grateful for the opportunity to work at a company like TRT. When I objected to this characterization, he said my attitude was exactly why people like me never advance in corporate America. He suggested I should know my place. The signature belonged to Sarah Johnson, former marketing manager. Complaint filed in 2019. Settlement amount, $280,000. Non-disclosure agreement signed under duress of termination. The second file was worse, much worse. Settlement payments organized by year and amount. A spreadsheet of human suffering, reduced to numbers. David Miller, 2016. $340,000. Racial discrimination after being passed over for promotion 3 times despite consistently superior performance reviews and client satisfaction scores. Angela Williams, 2018. $520,000. Wrongful termination after reporting Bradley for calling her aggressive and difficult to work with in meetings where she had simply disagreed with his strategy using data and facts. Lisa Morrison, 2019, $450,000. Sexual harassment after Bradley made repeated comments about her appearance and suggested that her career advancement would depend on her willingness to be friendlier to him outside office hours. James Patterson, 2021, $890,000. Racial discrimination and retaliation after James formally reported Bradley to HR and found himself demoted, transferred to a dead-end department, and eventually forced out within 3 months. 19 victims in total, $4.2 million in cumulative payments. Every single one bound by an ironclad non-disclosure agreement that prevented them from ever speaking publicly about what they had endured. The third file contained internal emails that proved the cover-up went all the way to the top. Bradley Thornton to the HR director, March 2020. I need you to stop bringing me these ridiculous sensitivity complaints. I run this company. I built this company. If people can't handle direct feedback and honest management, they shouldn't be working in a competitive corporate environment. Handle these situations and stop wasting my time. The HR director's response, sent the same day. Understood completely. We'll handle all future complaints internally and minimize documentation going forward. No paper trail. Handle internally. Minimize documentation. Corporate code for make the problems disappear without fixing anything or holding anyone accountable. The fourth file made Brenda's jaw tighten with barely contained rage. TRT's publicly reported diversity statistics claimed 23% minority representation in leadership positions. This impressive number appeared prominently in annual reports, investor presentations, recruiting materials, and press releases celebrating the company's supposed commitment to inclusion and equity. The actual number was 6%. How did they inflate the figures so dramatically? By counting white women married to executives as minority representation. By including a Latino supervisor of the janitorial staff as leadership. By manipulating every category in every possible way to manufacture a fiction of diversity while maintaining an overwhelmingly white male power structure. This wasn't just discrimination. This was securities fraud. Material misrepresentation to investors and federal regulators. Criminal liability waiting to be prosecuted. Cassie looked up from the documents, her face drawn with exhaustion and anger. This is enough to destroy him 10 times over. Maybe 20. Destruction isn't the goal. Brenda stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights without really seeing them. Accountability is the goal. Justice is the goal. These 19 people signed NDAs under threat of losing their jobs, their references, their ability to work in this industry again. They can't tell their stories. They were silenced by money and fear and a system designed to protect men like Bradley Thornton. She turned back to Cassie. But I can tell their story. I have the platform. I have the evidence. And now I have the power. She picked up her phone and dialed Malcolm Webb, an investigative journalist at the Baltimore Sun who had been trying to reach her since the video went viral. Ms. Hayes, thank you for calling back. I've been covering workplace discrimination for 20 years. Would you be willing to... I have something better than an interview, Mr. Webb. I have documents. 10 years of documented discrimination at TRT, buried settlements, falsified diversity reports, systematic cover-ups. Are you interested in seeing them? Malcolm was extremely interested. By 5 o'clock, former TRT employees were beginning to speak publicly for the first time. The viral video had given them courage. Their NDAs prevented discussing specific settlement terms, but they could finally share their experiences in general terms. Angela Williams appeared on local news, her voice shaking with years of suppressed anger. What you see in that video, that's the real Bradley Thornton, every single day. With anyone he decides doesn't deserve respect. I lived it for 3 years before I couldn't take it anymore. James Patterson posted a statement on social media that went viral within hours. He told me to my face, and I quote exactly, "People like you should be grateful we even let you in the building. I gave that company 5 years of my life. 5 years of being constantly reminded I didn't belong." At 7 o'clock that evening, Bradley Thornton was making desperate phone calls from his home office. "Walter, you have to postpone this meeting. I need more time. Time to prepare a proper defense. Time to get my lawyers coordinated. This is clearly a coordinated attack, and I need..." Walter Hoffman's voice was exhausted, drained of all patience and sympathy. He had been fielding calls all day from panicked board members, furious institutional investors, and journalists hungry for any comment. "She owns 55%, Bradley. If she wants a meeting tonight, we're having a meeting tonight. That's not my decision to make. That's simple mathematics. That's how corporate governance works when someone else holds majority control. I built this company. 15 years of my life. I took TRT from a nothing startup to a $3 billion enterprise. And apparently you spent those 15 years systematically discriminating against employees, covering up settlements, and lying to shareholders about diversity numbers." Walter's voice hardened. "There's evidence, Bradley. documents with your signature, emails in your own words, and a video with 60 million views showing exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. Bradley's voice turned pleading, desperate. Walter, we've known each other for 20 years. We've golfed together. Our wives are friends. You have to help me. You have to. If you want any chance whatsoever of surviving tonight's meeting, you need to do one thing. Apologize. Really, truly apologize. Not a press release written by lawyers. Not corporate damage control. Look Brenda Hayes in the eye and admit you were wrong. Apologize? To her? After she deliberately engineered this entire... She didn't engineer anything, Bradley. She stood there politely and gave you every opportunity to act like a civilized human being. You chose to humiliate her in front of 50 witnesses instead. That's entirely on you. The line went dead. An hour later, Rachel Thornton came home from a day spent away from the house, away from her husband, away from the life she had built on willful ignorance. Bradley was on his 5th whiskey, watching news coverage of his own destruction. His face appeared on every channel. The video played on endless loop. Commentators debated whether this was merely the end of his career or the beginning of criminal prosecution. "I'm voting against you tonight," Rachel said from the doorway. Her voice was calm, resolved, final. He turned slowly, the glass trembling in his hand. "What did you say?" "At the board meeting. I'll be voting with Ms. Hayes for your removal as CEO. I wanted you to know before it happens." "You're my wife, Rachel. 25 years. And for 25 years I've watched you treat people exactly the way you treated that woman last night. I've heard your jokes at dinner parties. I've seen how your assistants cycle through every few months, always leaving with haunted expressions. I've pretended not to notice which employees suddenly disappear after filing complaints. Rachel, you don't understand the pressures of... I understand perfectly." Her voice remained steady as stone. "I've been making excuses for you my entire marriage, telling myself you were just direct, that business was tough, that the people who complained were too sensitive or playing the race card." She shook her head slowly. "That video showed the whole world who you really are. And for the first time in 25 years, I couldn't look away. I couldn't make excuses. I just had to see." "You're going to destroy our family over one incident?" "No, Bradley. You destroyed our family years ago with hundreds of incidents. I'm just finally admitting I witnessed every single one." She walked out without looking back. At 8:15, Brenda Hayes stepped out of her hotel suite wearing a black power suit. Designer. Perfect. Commanding. Her mother's watch still circled her wrist, the one constant between the woman Bradley had humiliated and the woman who now controlled his fate. Jerome walked her to the elevator. "You ready?" "I've been ready for 30 years. She pressed the lobby button. "Every time someone looked at my skin and decided I didn't matter, every time I was underestimated, every time I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition, it all led to tonight." The elevator doors closed. 15 minutes later, she would walk into TRT headquarters. And Bradley Thornton's world would end. TRT headquarters rose against the night sky like a monument to corporate ambition and unchecked power. Normally, at 9 o'clock on a Saturday, the building would be dark and empty. Tonight, every light on the executive floor blazed against the darkness. Outside the main entrance, media had gathered in force. News vans from every major network lined the street. Cameras pointed at the glass doors like weapons. Reporters conducted live shots with the TRT logo glowing ominously behind them. On the sidewalk across the street, a crowd had assembled. Some held signs reading "TR Truth" and "Karma is Real" and "We Stand with Brenda." Others simply watched, drawn by the magnetic sense that history was being written in real time. Inside the building, the largest conference room had been prepared for what everyone knew would be a historic confrontation. A mahogany table worth more than most people's homes dominated the center of the room. Leather chairs surrounded it like thrones awaiting judgment. Screens lined every wall, ready to display whatever evidence the evening demanded. Board members arrived one by one, each carrying the visible weight of what was about to happen. Walter Hoffman entered first. At 67, he had navigated dozens of corporate crises, hostile takeovers, SEC investigations, shareholder revolts, but nothing like this. His face was gray with exhaustion and something else. Perhaps shame for not noticing sooner. Perhaps fear of his own complicity. Richard Sims took his seat without greeting anyone. The CFO had spent the day doing what he did best, calculating survival odds and positioning himself accordingly. He had quietly reached out to Brenda's team that afternoon, made clear he would be cooperative. Practical men adapted quickly to new power structures. Rachel Thornton arrived alone. She sat at the far end of the table, as physically distant from her husband's usual seat as possible. Her expression revealed nothing, but her presence spoke volumes. Margaret Davis, Thomas Wright, and David Miller filed in silently, taking their assigned seats. These were practical people. They had spent the day reviewing the same evidence Brenda had compiled. They knew which way the wind was blowing. They had made their calculations. Devin Price sat in a corner alongside the 5 journalists Brenda had authorized to attend. He still couldn't believe he was here. 24 hours ago, he had been an anonymous intern trying to survive. Now he was a witness to something that would be studied in business schools for decades. At 8:45, Bradley Thornton entered. He had dressed with obvious care, his most expensive suit, his most authoritative tie, his most confident shoes. He walked with the stride of a man who had spent 30 years winning every confrontation through sheer force of will and privilege. But his eyes betrayed the truth. Red-rimmed from sleepless hours, darting desperately around the room, searching for allies, finding none. He saw Rachel sitting apart from him, saw Devin in the corner, saw the press cameras, saw the empty chair at the head of the table. His chair, now waiting for someone else. "Why is there media here?" His voice was too loud, too aggressive. "This is a confidential board meeting, internal company business." Walter didn't look at him. The majority shareholder requested transparency. That's her legal prerogative. "This is outrageous. This is a violation of—" "Sit down, Bradley. It's almost 9. At exactly 9 o'clock, the double doors swung open. Brenda Hayes walked in, black power suit, perfect posture. Every step deliberate, measured, and absolutely certain. She moved with the authority of someone who knew exactly where she belonged and exactly what she was about to do. The room rose, not because protocol demanded it, not because anyone instructed them. They rose because her presence commanded it. Everyone except Bradley. He remained seated, jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. Brenda walked directly to the head of the table and sat down in his chair. "Let's begin." The first slide appeared on every screen simultaneously. Thornton Ridley Technologies, a pattern of discrimination, 15 years, 19 victims, $4.2 million in settlements, 0 accountability. Bradley's face drained of all color. "Before we proceed with any votes," Brenda said calmly, "I believe everyone in this room deserves to see exactly what started this conversation and exactly why we're here tonight." She pressed play. The video from the gala filled every screen in the room, 4 minutes and 23 seconds of crystal-clear footage. Bradley's words echoed off the walls, somehow even more damning in this context than they had seemed to the millions who watched online. "I don't shake hands with the help. Who let this black woman in here? People like her sneak in, pretend they belong, then cry racism when we throw them out." The board members watched in suffocating silence. Even those who had seen the video before couldn't look away. Seeing it in this room, at this table, with Bradley sitting right there unable to escape, it transformed viral content into courtroom evidence. When the video ended, Brenda continued without pausing for reactions. That video represents what happened to me. One incident. One evening. But Mr. Thornton's behavior didn't start last night, and I wasn't his first victim. I was simply the first victim with the resources to fight back. Second slide, HR complaints. Over the past 15 years, 19 formal complaints were filed against Bradley Thornton, 15 from employees of color, 4 from women reporting harassment or discrimination. Quotes appeared on screen, one after another. He told me I was a diversity hire and should be grateful. He said clients wouldn't be comfortable with someone who looked like me. He referred to me as that black guy in meetings, while I was sitting right there. Walter Hoffman looked physically ill. Margaret Davis had tears forming in her eyes. Third slide. Settlement money. $4.2 million was paid to silence these 19 people, all under non-disclosure agreements, all buried in legal expenses, never reported to shareholders, never disclosed to this board. A chart appeared showing payments by year. The amounts were staggering. Did anyone in this room know about these payments? Brenda asked. Heads shook around the table. Even Walter looked genuinely stunned. Fourth slide. Falsified diversity reports. TRT publicly reports 23% minority representation in leadership. The actual number is 6%. The discrepancy was manufactured through systematic fraud. Side-by-side comparison appeared. Public claims versus documented reality. This isn't just discrimination. This is securities fraud. Material misrepresentation to investors and federal regulators. Brenda turned to face Bradley directly. Mr. Thornton, would you like to respond? He stood slowly, grasping for the confidence that had always saved him before. These complaints were all investigated. They were all resolved, every single resolved by paying victims to remain silent. That's not resolution, that's obstruction. The video was a misunderstanding. You deliberately dressed to entrap. Entrap you into what? Brenda stood from her chair. Into treating another human being with basic dignity? I didn't make you call me the help. I didn't make you question why a black woman was allowed in your building. I didn't make you laugh while security dragged me out. Those were your choices. She walked toward him slowly. Here's my question. In 19 complaints, in $4.2 million of settlements, in 15 years of documented misconduct. She stopped directly in front of him. Did you ever once apologize? Did you ever look any of these people in the eye and say, I was wrong? Bradley had no answer. Oh, that's what I thought. Brenda returned to the head of the table. I move for a vote of no confidence in Bradley Thornton as CEO. The moment stretched like a held breath before execution. Every camera was recording. Every eye was fixed on the board members around the table. History balanced on the edge of 7 votes. We'll proceed by roll call, Walter announced, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to officiate. Richard Sims. The CFO didn't hesitate. He had calculated the odds. He knew which side of history he needed to be on. In favor of removal. Bradley's head snapped toward him like he'd been slapped. They had worked together for 12 years, shared hundreds of meals, closed deals worth billions. Richard didn't meet his eyes, didn't even glance in his direction. Margaret Davis. In favor. Thomas Wright. A pause. Wright had golfed with Bradley for a decade, had attended his children's weddings, had sat beside him through 100 board meetings and shareholder calls. In favor. David Miller. In favor. Rachel Thornton. The room shifted. Every head turned toward Bradley's wife, the woman who had stood beside him for 25 years, who had hosted his parties, who had smiled through countless events exactly like the one last night. Rachel rose slowly from her chair, For the first time all evening, she looked directly at her husband, not with anger, not with satisfaction, only with a profound and exhausted finality. In favor of removal. The words landed like physical blows. Bradley actually staggered backward, grabbing the edge of the table for support. Rachel. His voice cracked, broke, became something small and pathetic. 25 years, how can you? That's exactly why I have to. She remained standing, her voice steady as granite. 25 years of looking the other way. 25 years of pretending not to notice. 25 years of telling myself you were just direct or demanding or under pressure. She shook her head slowly, finally releasing decades of self-deception. That video showed me what everyone else sees. What I refused to see because it was easier to look away. I should have done this years ago. I'm sorry it took this long. She sat down without another word. Walter cleared his throat. And as chairman of this board, I also vote in favor of removal. He set down his pen with ceremonial finality. The motion passes unanimously, 7-0 with one abstention from Mr. Thornton himself. Bradley, effective immediately, you are removed as Chief Executive Officer of Thornton Ridley Technologies. The cameras captured everything. The verdict, Bradley's crumbling face, Rachel's composed dignity, the historic moment when a man who had spent 30 years believing himself untouchable learned the truth about accountability. Bradley stood frozen in place. 15 years. Everything he had built, everything he had believed himself to be, collapsing in real time. You can't do this. His voice was barely above a whisper now. This is my company. I made this company. Without me, there would be nothing here. You would all be nothing. Brenda rose from her chair. No, Mr. Thornton. It was never your company. It belongs to the shareholders who trusted you with their investment, to the employees who gave you their labor and their loyalty, to the 19 people whose careers you destroyed and whose pain you bought and buried in legal files. She walked toward him with measured steps. Last night, you looked at me and saw nobody. You saw my skin and my simple clothes and decided I wasn't worthy of basic human courtesy. You told everyone I didn't belong. She stopped directly in front of him. Eye to eye, equal to equal, victor to vanquished. But here's what you never understood. I didn't need your handshake to belong. I didn't need your approval to succeed. I built everything I have while people exactly like you underestimated me. I succeeded not because of the system you represent, but in spite of it. She extended her hand one final time. Now you need to shake my hand, Mr. Thornton. Now you need my approval. She held the position for 3 long seconds while cameras flashed and history recorded itself. Then she lowered her hand. And honestly, I don't think you've earned it. She turned to Walter. Security can escort Mr. Thornton from the building, and please ensure he uses the main entrance, in full view of the press. We wouldn't want anyone to think he doesn't belong. 2 security guards approached. They positioned themselves on either side of Bradley like bookends of justice. As he was led toward the door, he passed Devon Price, the intern, the young black man whose courage had started the avalanche. Bradley stopped. Something ugly and desperate twisted his face. You destroyed everything I built. Devon's voice was absolutely steady. No, sir. You destroyed yourself a long time ago. I just made sure the world finally witnessed it. The aftermath came in waves, each one reshaping the landscape of corporate America. Within 24 hours, Bradley Thornton's resignation became official. He released no statement, gave no interviews, retreated to his Connecticut estate, a cautionary tale being studied in business schools around the world. Federal investigators opened inquiries into TRT's discrimination practices and falsified diversity reports. 3 executives, including the HR director who had orchestrated 15 years of cover-ups, received subpoenas. Criminal charges were widely expected. TRT's stock, after cratering 22% in the days following the scandal, began a remarkable recovery under Brenda's leadership. Within 6 months, shares reached all-time highs. Investors, it turned out, responded enthusiastically to transparency, accountability, and genuine corporate reform. The 19 victims were released from their non-disclosure agreements. A class action lawsuit was filed. TRT settled for $34 million. Each victim received substantial compensation, a formal written apology, and something money couldn't purchase, the freedom to finally tell their stories publicly. Devin Price never returned to his internship. He didn't need to. Brenda Hayes offered him a full-time position at Hayes Capital Partners. He accepted without a moment's hesitation. 3 years later, he would be managing his own investment portfolio. Rachel Thornton filed for divorce. She donated her entire $8 million settlement to organizations supporting victims of workplace discrimination. When reporters asked why, she said simply, "I stayed silent for too long. This is how I finally speak." 1 month after the board meeting, Brenda sat in her new corner office at TRT headquarters. The building was the same, but everything else had changed. New policies, new leadership, a new culture being built one day at a time. On her desk sat a framed photograph of her mother in her nursing uniform. Beside it, the simple Timex watch that had circled her mother's wrist through 40 years of night shifts. Cassie knocked on the open door. "Devin's here. First day nerves." Devin walked in wearing his first professional suit, looking terrified and exhilarated simultaneously. "Do you know why I really hired you?" Brenda asked. "The video?" "The courage. You had everything to lose and you posted anyway. That's rarer than any degree, and more valuable than any credential." She stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to the company. We have a lot of work to do." He shook it firmly. That night, Brenda stood alone at her window, watching city lights flicker below. Her phone buzzed. Jerome. "Your mother would be proud." She touched the watch on her wrist. "I know. That's what keeps me going." If this story moved you, leave a comment. Have you ever been completely underestimated by someone? What happened when they discovered the truth? Share this with anyone who needs to remember. Karma is patient, but karma is real.